you mentioned the idea of an explorer.
Mm.
Now, the mythos of the explorer, in Western thought, it's like somebody who's completely free, and they're in that liminal space between what is known and what is unknown.
Mm.
And they're, very bravely, each step increases what is known and decreases what is unknown. And they're the person taking that brave step, not knowing if they're about to step on a weird snake that no one's ever seen before.
Insight and awareness, spiritual explorer. Soul intuitive, emotional and spiritual mentor and award-winning author, Lorraine Nilon.
Welcome, explorers, and thank you for being part of the adventure. Today we have a special guest. We have Tyson Yunkaporta, who's written a book called... How you going, matey? And your book's called Sandtalk. So we're going to kick it off. Tell us about your book, and then let's see where this conversation rolls to.
Well, I'm really interested in yarning with you, because, we're both people who've written kind of self-helpy, sort of guru-y, small g guru, wisdom-y kind of spirit, and maybe chemtrails are a thing, like skating on the edge of sort of cult dynamics. Probably like I went further than you, because my book from 2019, Sandtalk, that you're interested in talking about, that was very much an ancient wisdom guru kind of self-helpy sort of culty, snake oily kind of text, So my next book coming out in October, that's basically debunking the first book. Anyway, okay, I said yes to this interview because I really wanted to talk to a kind of a person who's a bit of a guru-y kind of thing going on, self-helpy kind of thing going on, but refuses to take that big step that'll make their book into a best-selling airport book, by like not doing the limbic hijack bloody tricks of that gurus tend to do. Anyway, so I'm interested in talking.
Well, because the trouble is that if you what everything is being leaded up to now is that you have one statement and then you milk that statement and then and you ride that. But for me, it's about if you want to be on a truly spiritual journey, which is just really knowing who you are, getting to know who you are, and making decisions about how you respond to whatever is occurring in your life, instead of just being emotionally reactive, then you have to get real with yourself. You have to get honest. And every now and then, something's going to come along and throw crap in your face, and you have to learn how to deal with it. So you got to be resilient and all the rest of it. So I don't really ascribe to the guru statement at all, because I feel like I'm in the exploration. You know what I mean? I'm still learning. I'm still stumbling.
Well, that's why your book isn't a bestseller. Right? If you're not enough of a bastard to like employ a whole heap of little tricks, influencer tricks to tap directly into the limbic system of your audience, then you're not going to be a bestseller. You're going to have a small number of relationships that you're committed to genuinely and strongly, and you'll help those people because you're in relation with them. So, but what you won't do is pay the rent. So
that's true. That is true. That is true. So what are you debunking in your book? What is it that really annoys you that you know now that you didn't know then?
Well, that's a trap to fall into as well, because you can get just as addicted, and you can hijack your limbic system and get a little rush out of just as much out of like a sort of a capital D debunking skeptic kind of thing. Like I get a bit of a thrill out of that, of debunking like different things and information, especially if it's really popular and I can say to like a whole heap of people or someone who's like, Freakonomics, have you read Freakonomics? And I just go on them and then they're done. There's a bit of a thrill in that. So you got to avoid that too. So
that's true.
So for me, I try to I try and find frameworks and heuristics, a few different ones, to analyze the field a bit, and I'll use that as my lens to analyze it. Always with of course, Indigenous methodology running in the background, because I'm Indigenous. But I don't want to front and center that either, because if that's just like, oh, I'm jumping on the bandwagon of centering native voices, and people who are sort of going nuts for ancient wisdom at the moment,
Hmm.
if I front and center that, then I'm just signaling this pre-packaged audience, and I don't want to do that. So anyway, that's where I'm up to.
Yeah, well, we've probably confused everybody now.
Yeah, I can go through those things. Hang on. What I'll do is I'll read you this thing here. Well, I don't know. I don't mind. I like being confused. If I'm in a state of
Well,
confusion,
actually, you can learn a lot in confusion. It's a good starting
yeah,
point for where you need to go.
yeah.
So
Well,
so so
it's
answer.
usually confusion is the sensation you feel when there's cognitive dissonance going on.
Yeah,
Cognitive dissonance is shit that doesn't quite match up, and it's supposed to be uncomfortable because it's supposed to direct your attention to that thing, not not to find relief in some bullshit to loop your way out of it and avoid
yeah.
facing it. Yeah, which usually
Well, and
happens.
I explain a lot to my clients, like reality can be reality should be here. You should be really
Mm,
looking at reality, but we'll have a
mm.
belief system out here, and
That's it.
in between the two, we're doing justifying excuses, making up stories, narratives, whatever suits us. So we don't
Mm,
look at reality. We just
mm.
get to the belief that we want to hold on to. But while
That's
ever
it.
we're doing that, we're not dealing with the truth of what's going on within ourselves, and that then
Mm.
transfers into we don't get real honest about what's happening around us either. So we're just
Yeah,
trying
that's it.
to find information that will pacify the belief that we want to believe. Yeah, it doesn't work
But
for us.
it's at the same time, you do need to have some kind of metaphysics. Otherwise, you're just this thing floating around in the quantum soup. You've got to have something to hold on to, just so that you have reality. You
But
have
that
a
is
reality.
part of reality. That is part of
I
reality.
know. And you can't
Yeah.
construct that thing on your own. You can't just pick and choose. So you kind of have to outsource that to someone else that you trust, or a culture that you trust, or a body of knowledge that you trust.
Yeah,
And
I, I,
that's where it's hard, because you got to really trust. I mean, you're trusting your whole life and reality to that. You don't want that to be just one person either. It should be a tradition, and a long one, that you're outsourcing that
yeah,
to. 'Cause otherwise,
yeah,
someone can really tip your reality upside down and shake you, and
yeah.
turn you into their, like, I don't know, their sub slave or something.
Well, and that happens, and I think that's why I always talk about spiritual explorer is that
Mm,
you look at things and examine them and you work out what resonates with you, and then you
mm,
know why it resonates with you.
mm,
Like, and that's where self reflection comes in. Is that if you can be honestly self reflective,
mm,
and and sometimes we feel things, but we don't know how to articulate it. We don't know
mm,
how to identify in words what it is. So,
mm,
and sometimes that's the exploration, is trying to
mm,
work out, and then you outsource information on that. Like
mm,
shame, a lot of people don't understand the reality of shame, and when you
mm.
get the information, or narcissism, you don't understand it, and you get information about it, and then all of a sudden you're going, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense
That's
because of
it.
what you've experienced.
Well, sometimes it's sometimes there's a right story that isn't backed up by the reality, but it's just right because it it helps you put together a useful heuristic for how to get through the reality and actually help the world and help people. Um,
Mm,
so for example, you mentioned the idea of an explorer.
mm,
Now, the mythos of the explorer, in Western thought, um, it's like somebody who's completely free, and they're in that liminal space between what is known and what is unknown,
mm.
and they're very bravely, each step increases what is known and decreases what is unknown, and they're the person taking that brave step, not knowing if they're about to step on a weird snake that no one's ever seen before. You know
That's
what I mean?
true.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
so there's this idea that you're an independent, completely free agent, but at the same time while you're not constrained by all the safety nets, there are no safety nets. You know what I mean? It's about
Yeah.
being brave and all that sort of thing. So the mythos is pretty cool. But
Yeah.
so that's right story, is that mythos that goes with it. But the reality is, explorers are backed by wrong story, like the story of discovery, for example, that
Yeah.
age of discovery. And the idea is you're not free, because basically you're being funded by a king and queen, or a very big East India company, or you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
but usually you'll be backed by a king and queen who will cut your freaking head off if you don't bring back enough potatoes and I don't know, necklaces made out of
Riches and land.
ears of ears of natives or something, and maps to where the gold is. So you're not really your own person. So the actual story is a wrong story. That idea of discovery is wrong story. But the mythos of the explorer, and where it sits in everybody's hearts, as a fairy tale, concept, that feels like right story. um Anyway,
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. When I look at explorer, I'm coming from that exploring your inner self. And when we look
mm,
at historic explorers, you're correct in what you're saying. And
mm,
they also, when they discovered things, they didn't look at the reality of it either. They
yeah,
decided, they put a belief system over the top of it at what they said they discovered.
mm,
Whereas there was already, every country that has had an explorer come in and change it has
yeah,
actually, or there was already something there, but another
yeah,
belief system or
mm,
a sense of control and entitlement came over the top of it like a bloody tidal wave,
yeah.
and
Well, they
held
were
that
like,
space.
usually the explorers were just the first tourists.
Yeah,
And they
basically.
had they
Yeah,
had basically tour guides taking them through all these different countries,
yeah,
and they were traveling on roads that were already made.
yeah,
So they were just the first tourists to come into a particular resort. Um, but if they were bad tourists, like who didn't stay with the Kontiki tour, who decided to go off on their own, they wanted to explore the back streets of Cartagena. Instead of just going to the souvenir shop and jumping back on the bus, then they probably got abducted or killed or stabbed, or they just died of thirst and hunger, the poor buggers. So
yeah,
if they were
that's
good
true.
tourists, they did well, and if they were bad tourists, then they didn't do very well. Yeah, those
And
explorers.
that's what, when I look at the individual who's trying to understand themselves, they've got a tidal wave of belief systems that they've been indoctrinated into. So
Yeah.
it's about working out what parts of those belief systems really resonate with your soul, that's my terminology, and what doesn't suit you and has been ingrained in you,
Mm,
but it's not of you. And then
mm,
working out how to form your own, I suppose it's your own understanding of
mm.
yourself within the
Well,
life that
yeah.
you're having.
And if you're
Yeah.
out of your place, which is almost
Mm.
everybody is diasporic and has been displaced and dispossessed of their actual reality. When you're out of your place, how do you identify which locals you can trust? In your
Yeah.
new place that you
Yeah.
have to inhabit, so you can come into relation with that. It's
Yeah.
difficult. Hey,
Well, a true spiritual journey where you're really dealing with your stuff, you're going to be challenged. You're going to be confronted with a lot of stored emotions and beliefs that, when you pull
mm,
them apart, you'll go, A, they're not
yeah,
logical.
yeah,
B, they stem from somewhere else. And then you're going to go into a type of shock at how much you've used that belief system against your natural self. So there's this whole concept of learning, relearning, unlearning process as you go along your
mm,
own unfolding spiritual journey.
mm,
So, and it's unique to everyone because we're coming through our own life experiences and traumas and all the rest of it, which has created a filter to how we're seeing ourselves in the world. So,
mm,
it's really getting the filters where we can get as much clarity as we can. Now, I'm not confessing to
mm,
say that I've got a lot of clarity all the time, but I have moments of brilliance, that
mm,
I go,
mm.
oh, I get that, I get that. And there's other times where I'll do the spin, jump on the merry-go-round, do a couple
Yeah.
of laps, and
Mm.
then I get it, because I've had to
Mm.
experience it and really to understand it.
That's
So
it. And
yeah,
there's this kind of idea that no journey can happen, no growth can happen without a journey, and no journey can be, productive unless it's a hero's journey.
yeah,
So you become a hero or you become a heroine, and this is problematic for women, you know, because women are freaking vulnerable, and they don't get to do as much free fall, individualistic hero's journey activities as their male counterparts get to do. So they're not seen to be advancing and growing, as fast as their female counterparts within these organizations. Within tech, I'm talking tech companies, the finance companies, the finance sections of banks. So women who are employed in these spaces, they don't get to participate as much in that stuff. So and a lot of women try and do that El Camino, that
no, you have to
freaking
explain it.
pilgrimage, that walk that's in Spain.
Oh, okay, you got you.
That
Sorry,
one.
yeah, yeah,
Shirley MacLaine, like all these ladies do it. There was a Reese Witherspoon movie,
yeah,
like that was
yeah.
like it was made from a self-help book about there's heaps of self-help books about what people have learned on the Camino. Anyway, and we were watching it for about 15 minutes here, and then we just went, hey, that white lady. She got too much shit she's trying to carry around there. And what she's throw his shoes away, got angry. But the biggest question was, why is she on her own? Why is she alone?
All
We
right,
can't
yeah,
imagine, from our point of view, we can't imagine what you could gain from a situation where you're alone and you're not in relation. You don't take yourself off alone and then develop yourself and bring that back as a gift to the group. You grow with the group. You grow with your
yeah.
tribe, your family,
Well,
everything else. You can't grow away from that because you're nothing if you're not in relation. But there's all
yeah,
this self-help, there's all this coaching that demands that people fix themselves, grow themselves, make themselves better. As a neoliberal subject, you have to be this perfect self-managing employee that is constantly responsible for their own professional development, personal development, that makes them a better employee, makes them be able to last longer before they break down and burn out.
mm,
Someone who can manage their own shit by, if your job is really stressful and really dangerous, and you manage not to lose your arm, we need to know that you're able to do some mindfulness stuff to avoid burning out with stress from like all the horrendous stuff and the safety measures we're taking away from you all the time, and your retirement fund that we're stealing, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's kind of where it's all going. It's all this stuff is development, personal development. It's the same as what development means in the broader culture and in the global economy. What does development mean to you, Lorraine? Development.
to me, it is. Well, it depends whether, if I look at it personally, it's for me to come back to my authentic self. To strip
Mm,
away the stuff that causes me to feel like I'm not good enough, or causes me to not really embrace who I am. So that's the stuff that's in the way of me
mm,
operating from my true soul. Development, as in society, is there's a few things we need to get really honest about: the systems we have that don't work, the way that we are devaluing people right across the board, and the
right.
way that we are using the desire for
Mm,
profits to
mm,
destroy, basically not only the planet, but also the people's emotional well-being. Because I don't meet many people that aren't struggling in some form, and that's increasing. So if we're, and I agree with what you're saying about, with relationships of all types, whether it's business
mm,
or personal, and family, friend groups, tribes, whatever, that's they're going to challenge you with your own stuff, because
mm.
we're how we interact. The
That's
trouble
it.
is, I see, is that people aren't interacting from any authenticity,
Mm,
and so we've got these fake relationships, and we're turning on each other very quickly. very easily. One judgment, one thought, and then all of a sudden we're turning on people, which means we're not listening.
Yeah.
And we're not hearing what we're
Well,
not having discussions.
I think that's because people are looking for the authentic thing. And so they look for something that they can seize on, grab on it as a kernel. They can say, that's my authentic self. And so they fetishize some aspect of their biology
Yeah.
or their sexuality or their anything, some facet of identity, of social identity that's, sort of slides into this broader story of dimensions of social space, that people can try and fetishize one aspect of that above all others and call that their center,
Yeah.
but it's not
Yeah.
their center. And even the concept of authentic, that's a fetishization of an idea that there is something unique about you, rather than the fact that, well, maybe you're just like an AI that has some basic protocols for how to be in place, and that you're not made of anything except what you acquire in terms of relationships as you go. Yeah, I can't say that very well, so I'm going to read you 3 short paragraphs from a new book.
Okay, cool.
This
This is from your new book?
This will set it up. Yeah, this is the new book, which is called Right Story, Wrong Story. Anyway, so the first book was Sandtalk, and then this book's pretty much debunking most of what I wrote before. Anyway, here we go. So there's not much going on inside of you or me as individuals, not much at all. Like me, you've probably had family, mentors, coaches, authors, teachers, and algorithmically tailored content telling you the opposite of that for years. Maybe they told you that inside there is a unique being of hidden depths, fabulous talents, bespoke traumas, and a demographic profile of privileges and disadvantages that determines your individual fate. Maybe they gave you a mask and called it a face. So you imagine that entity into being, and right now it's riding your body around like a horse, a complex but flawed rider who is desperately lonely and in need of endless personal development and affirmation. Your rider needs to be heard. Your rider needs to do breath work. Your rider needs to learn cultural humility. Your rider needs to self-actualize. But maybe we're so much less complicated and more complex than that, us humans. Maybe we just have basic operating protocols hardwiring us to interact with our landscape, to graze on information from our country, language, and culture until we grow a relational net that can collectively process complexity, a mind extending beyond the skull and body as far as our storied maps of being can go. Perhaps when we create, think, feel, or communicate, we're only able to do so to the limits of these relational nets. That's the 3 paragraphs. Anyway, so maybe you're not you. There is no special frickin' thing at your core, at your authentic core, that actual authentic you is just your net and network of relations and what you've learned culturally, linguistically, and every other way within that net that spreads out. Because every individual's net is going to be different, like a fingerprint.
Yeah, true.
Maybe that's your authentic self. It's your relations with humans and non-humans that go along all the journeys that your life has been on, and the weak and the strong and distant and present links all in your life, relations with humans and non-humans.
Yeah. Well, it's your relationships that, if we look back in our past, they're what we remember, isn't it?
Yeah.
Good, bad, or ugly. And see, I look at myself as, I look at humanity as souls within a human body that are aware that they are souls, that we're from something else greater than what we understand. And I look at mankind, and I get a bit of flack for the word, but I started using it a long time ago, so I just continue, is it's still souls in a human body, but we've forgotten that we are, and we're stuck just looking at the, I call it the more unconscious energies, where we're operating from, greed and take, and we're not coming from the true essence of who we are, and that each of us are here having an experience. So what we're born into is the experience that we're going to have, and that I understand the purpose of life to be to really get to understand yourself as a spark within a bigger collective.
Mm.
So
That's it.
Yeah.
Because look, the knowledge that you and I share now that we have a relationship, because we've been back and forthing for weeks, and now we're here, aren't we?
Yes.
So, even if I never see you again after tomorrow, we have a connection, we have a
That's
relation,
right.
and there's knowledge that sits in between us.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So so for example, everything that I know right now, and that I will know in the future about the idea of moderating my skepticism, and the idea that there's more nuance to the whole sort of self-actualization thing. Everything around that, that sits in our relationship, that knowledge, so whenever I think about more or find out more through my experience about that, or even read more, that will be stored in the relational space between us, if you imagine it like a line. And that's where the knowledge is. It's not in my mind. It's not in my brain. It's not in my body. It's in that relational space between us. Now, what happens when I die? What happens to all that? It doesn't immediately zip and uploads to you. That's not how it happens. That connection, that in-between space, that relational space, that remains. The entire information, or all the informatics of my relational network, that's what stays. That's what stays behind after I die. And as far as I'm concerned, that's your God, that's your spirit, that's your bloody whatever people think of as your soul. It's there now. It's your relationships, because that's the thing that remains after you die, is your relations.
That's true.
And those things change and move as other people draw on that knowledge and then pass it on to others. That's how our ancestors are still present. Is that these relational webs, they turn into 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions that resist, space and time. And our ancestors are present in those relational informatics that are permanent, which is really exciting. They're not permanent if you upload all of your information to the cloud, because that's only as permanent as the rare earth metals on this planet are. Because once they run out, the whole thing crashes. It's only as permanent as how long it's going to take before there's another solar flare that will, destroy every device on the planet. So your permanent data, information and stuff is only, it can only be stored permanently in intergenerational relationships, where there's a continuity of culture and a continuity of story, of right story. Wrong story don't last. Long story don't last more than a
Well, it
century.
shouldn't last either. It shouldn't last. It's interesting because in the first book I wrote a lot about collective energy, and in there I actually write, when two people come together, I bring my collective energy, both what I refer to as both my consciousness and my unconsciousness, and yours, and then there is another collective formed, which is you and I, and whatever we exchange within there is exchange between. And so that's how collective energy gets formed.
That's
and I look
metaphor.
at so what, when we walk into a room, there's a collective energy and we feel it. So, but we become, an individual, our own stuff is a collective within that collective. So I know that sounds a bit confusing, but when you understand the energetics,
we're both saying the same thing.
I think, definitely.
But which has more market value?
Well, no, it's if I can use my collective energy to attract money to me and manifest, that's the market value.
Yeah.
That's where we're at now. Whereas it's not
that. Where you could have more market value from your message is if someone influential started using that and did well with it and started passing it on.
Yeah.
Let's say Gwyneth Paltrow started like, I don't know, call next,
I'm just
name
happy
the
for
next like
people.
vagina
Um,
scented candle after you, then and then, that would
copywriting, you
increase
reckon?
market value. But until then, my version of this is more valuable than yours in the global marketplace of ideas because I've got the patina, that beautiful shine of ancient wisdom, uh, coming onto it. Now, this is important. I'm mentioning this because it's really important. One of the lenses, one of the I don't know, a sieve, something that I sift through all my stuff with now
Hmm.
is this kind of framework of logical fallacies. So I get all these logical fallacies right, and I've made a symbol for each one, and they're all in this boomerang. And I worked
Right.
on that with a group of theologians, like a dozen theologians from around the planet, sat down for a week, and so they were all from different religious
Can I
traditions.
pick one and you explain it to me?
Yep.
All
Hang
right.
on a second.
Okay. Well, I'll go the kind of branch one with the little circle at the end.
All right.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
that's interesting because that kind of came up for us earlier. But that's Argumentum ad naturam. They all have
Okay.
Latin names. So
I was going to say, please don't
this
ask me to repeat
speaks
that.
Latin. Yeah. Well, so originally, these were all in Greek because Aristotle, he's the one who invented the discipline of identifying fallacies, logical
Okay.
fallacies. So he had about a dozen of them. Anyway, the Romans invaded Greece and like killed everybody, and then stole all the thinkers and turned them into slaves to tutor their stupid nephews and nieces. And they turned all their disciplines into Latin. So my boomerang speaks Latin. So it's
Okay.
the fallacy is called argumentum ad naturam, and that is the argument to nature, argument from nature. So the idea is, if it's natural, if it's authentic, it's natural. If it's natural, it's better. So like for example, so I'm of indigenous descent, therefore I just know ancient knowledge. It just somehow comes out of my biology. That one. Or the idea is, well, this scented candle is better than this other scented candle because the other one is synthetic and this one is organic. Um, if it grows in the ground, then it's probably good for you. If it comes out of a test tube, it's probably bad for you. All of these fallacies that, like, they're not necessarily true. In some cases, they might be, but in terms of logic, you can't rely on that. You can't
Yeah.
go, oh, that proves it. If it's natural, it's good. It's like, well, taipan venom is not good. Um, it's natural as hell, but I don't want it anywhere near me or my kids. Anyway, so this is I just wanted to show you that one. So
Mm.
so it took a lot. Like I was in the United States at University of Notre Dame there with all of these theologians from around the planet, and we sat for a week together and had a whole heap of yarns. And there's like 12 different religions and disciplines represented there. So
So,
from all that work, I distilled out like 12 logical fallacies that I start like using those as this net to like sift through all my bullshit to take out the larger turds from my thinking.
right.
So
So,
I identify the fallacies in my own work, and it really
yeah.
helps. It helps to strengthen not just your arguments, but it helps you just move away from arguing in the first place, trying to argue things. It takes you into just speaking as much as possible, just speaking what's needed for that situation, the truth that's needed, or the information that people need. Yeah.
See, I
It's,
class that as being present because, like, when, say you come into a situation and you want to impart your wisdom, and you might be wise, and you want to impart your wisdom, and it's about you wanting to impart your wisdom, right?
yeah,
So then you got an ego feed, and it's about proving you're right, and then
that's
the
him.
whole little thing happens there, or big
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Whereas if you're present, then you can operate from that. Well, I call it the inner wisdom, and it is where you
Mm,
can discern what's an appropriate story now that might help someone, and whether it does or it doesn't, at least you've had the intent to try. And then wherever they take it, or wherever it falls for them, because a lot of people can hear, we can have 5 people listening to this podcast, and they're all going to hear different things. They're going to interpret it different ways. So you can, for me, it's just important to acknowledge that when you're coming, if you've got something that you can share it for a reason, not to stroke your ego. Because what's the point of that? There's no sharing in that. That's taking the airspace. So it's like operating from there. So that's how I look at it. So I'm going to ask you the question we ask everyone. So what does humanity need to acknowledge and understand for us to evolve?
It's just like, yes, you are a fabulous and unique individual. However, you are bound irrevocably within your relational obligations. Your obligations to all the human and non-human entities.
So these obligations are a good thing?
Yeah. Oh, these obligations are a good thing because this holds you back. Yes, you have to have this power, but it has to be held in check by relational obligations. That's the check and balance to your, running off into the universe, and it's like Jafar in Aladdin. Right. There you go. That's what I tell to the world. What's this guru's like special wisdom? Watch Aladdin again, and how they catch Jafar in the end is he gets all the power in the universe that a genie has. But that also means he's got a itty bitty living space. He's stuck in a lab. He can't even use it, only to obey other people's wishes. Yeah. So it's kind of like what it's like. Yes, you are unique. You're potentially unique and fabulous. And you can all be Elon, and you can all be Bezos. You could be Jeffrey. You can be Elon. You could be anything you like. You could be Gwyneth Paltrow and Oprah and all the rest. You could be that. However, hold yourself, because who you really are is not that. Who you really are is your relationships. So hold yourself in your obligations to those relations. Always. Yeah. You are. That's
really good advice.
In that way, hold and yourself. Limited. Yep. You're limited in that way.
It makes me think of a story. I was at a barbecue, and the kids were all sitting around. This is going back years ago. There was all these kids sitting around a table, and I walked over to the table, and they were playing a game, and it was, who do you want to be? So they were saying, Batman, and they, someone was saying the celebrity at the time, and a famous singer, and got round to this little girl, and she looked at them all, and you could see she was confused, and she was learning the drums. And she said, I just want to be me and be able to play the drums. And I thought that was a beautiful answer, because she was like identifying what excited her. But I just want to be me, but able to play the drums. Whereas the rest were all fictional, and, what was in media and all the rest of it. And so I clapped her. I was like, yay, don't lose that. Don't lose that. You just be you.
Nice.
So... yeah. So, and we lose that because we are so influenced by the social media and society and media, etc. So, yeah. So it's important to hold on to who we are and know that that's expanding and sometimes subtracting, but our awareness is an expanding and ever evolving understanding. You don't just get to know who you are and you're, touchdown, your job done. It just keeps moving, and that's evolution. Keeps moving. That's how I look at it, anyway.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, are you happy to play Flip the Book?
So, yep. Whatever you like. I'm at your mercy.
Our relationship collective is about sharing time.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So we've got book 1, 2, or 3. What would you like?
Ooh, hang on. I got cups going. Coconut halves. Wow, which one's the ball in? Number 2.
Number 2. Okay, so that is actually Breaking Free from the Chains of Silence. It's a book I wrote for abuse, childhood sexual abuse victims. It's about
Nice.
pedophilia. And at the
Oh,
back,
shit.
and it's a heavy topic, but it's about all the things that the trauma and what they're dealing with and how we can support them and etc. At the back, I've got a soul read where you can, because they need a bit of alleviation from that, they come back and understand yourself. So, and I refer to at the back is the core essence of who you are. So I look at what your core essence is, and it's changeable, and we're all different combinations. And I think there's 24 of them in there that I've written about. There's way more, of course. So can you give me a number between 189 to 215?
212.
212?
See where you.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. You got 4 paragraphs to pick from.
Okay. 3.
3. Okay. So this is under the heading of trust. So the core essence that I'm referring to is trust.
And that came up for us.
Yeah.
I think we mentioned it at some stage.
I think so. I'll have to go back. The purity of your trust is not a prize given to those who just appease you, but to those who care about your freedom to be of the truth of yourself. Trust is knowing when all others walk away, there will be a soul walking towards you. Trust means you care deeply.
Nice.
So that would be important to you, trust. Yeah.
Well, look, I like where your book is going. I like the direction of it, especially when I look at most of the people in the self-help sort of industrial complex space. Usually, child abuse is used as a limbic system hijack for like cult kind of dynamics to grab people and ensnare them. So for a start, usually it's a guru. I've really researched this a lot. Okay, it's like a guru thing. Is this idea of the wounded mystic? So a lot of your gurus will have a horrendous child abuse story, and often it'll be linked to something like satanic ritual abuse, because then they get to piggyback off the moral panic, wrong stories of, Michelle remembers and stuff from the whole satanic panic, which has been running through from the 80s and never really quite went away. They hitchhike a little bit onto that. Piggyback on those wrong story narratives, but they identify their own horrendous childhood abuse tale in order to, become the wounded mystic. Then what they do once they have people limbically hijacked by that, then they start to do suppressed memory stuff. They start to try and ensnare people with, you have been abused. I can tell from your behaviors. I can tell that you've been abused and you've forgotten. Okay, and so then they, through the power of suggestion, they get people to remember all these horrendous, abuse things that have happened that actually haven't happened to them, and they use this as a way to cut off their relationships with the rest of their family and their community.
Right. So you're like a cult setting.
Yeah, exactly. So usually in these books, even if you look at them, anytime a self-help book, comes into, childhood abuse, it'll be working its way through that same process, end up with the ultimate goal of cutting off the relationships of this, of the reader or the sort of cult inductee, cut off the relationships with their family and, the rest of their life. And then basically send all of those relational connections towards the guru or the cult itself, to completely sublimate the identity of the person and to basically turn them into a living slave, into a slave that can be utilized in whatever way the organization or the church or the guru sees fit. Yeah, so you've got to watch out for these bastard things, and it's nice to see that you've done a book without doing that, because I tell you, 9 out of 10 of them, they do that shit. That's the
That, right.
pattern
So
they
this is
follow.
what you've studied. You've studied this to
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah, right.
I've studied cult induction techniques, and um,
Yeah, it probably makes more sense
cult
when people
dynamics.
understand that, though.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
But
Like what you just said
I've been
would make more
studying
sense if people know that.
everything,
Yeah,
everything since
right.
that moment when I was standing in the sound booth and realized that I was being disingenuous in my first book, and that I was, creating these little limbic system hijacks and using these little cult dynamics thing. That's when I decided, oh no, I'm going to study this real close, and I'm going to
Right,
find out how all
brilliant.
this stuff works, and I'm
Yeah,
going to figure out ways that I can, you know, let people know where I've found this in my own work, because then I'm not really criticizing anyone else, and then they
yeah.
can feel free to, without having been judged, sort of have a look into their own stuff and find better ways to cover it up. No, stop doing it.
No, we are looking for authentic information. This book, pedophilia abuse, is not my history. I'm not an abuse victim. And when I started working with people, about 70% of my clientele were abuse victims. So what I started, it took me 12 years to write. I just kept keeping a documentation of the themes. What were they struggling to deal with? What belief systems that were created because they had been abused? What was the ongoing trauma, and how was that sort of manifesting in their life? How was it presenting? What were they hiding? Like a lot of them, even when you touched into their shame and things like that, they had trouble explaining it, but it was so impactful in the way that they were living.
Mm,
So the idea, and then what's it like for family members or people that are working with abuse victims, because you can say some statements that can send them backwards very
mm.
quickly, and you can put people in a position where they feel more vulnerable, so they come to you for support, and you
Yeah,
make
yeah.
them more vulnerable. And
Mm,
the amount of
mm.
people that I've heard that have gone to masseuses and counselors and things like that, and they've been re-traumatized and abused again.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. So it's written it from that place of like, well, here's the themes I found, and I just write them out to what was
Hmm.
found, and
Well,
and
look,
I do put a soul
you're the
spin on
only,
it.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
you're the only person working in this space, in the self-help space, that has some kind of spirituality attached to it, who has written about childhood abuse without creating a origin story for herself.
I haven't got
Um,
one. Yeah.
Yeah. So usually people will create an abuse origin story to turn
Yeah.
themselves into the wounded mystic. And you're the only one I've seen who doesn't do that. And that's why you're not selling any books. You got to come up with a you got to come up with a UFO abduction story or fucking something, or it's just not going to happen. You're not going to sell any freaking books like this. Just
Yeah,
telling
do it
people
right
the
with the
truth.
rewards. Yeah, sales
Yeah,
is
yeah.
right.
Nobody wants to hear about your, like, authentic self in relation in the world,
Yeah.
who's just like a really good person getting about their business and making the world better, like one relationship at a time. Like, no, I want the UFO abduction story. I want someone who's going to sell me crystals. I want
Yeah,
the
yeah.
I want the bullshit, because that's what I get excited about.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting because I used to do the spiritual expos, and when you
Mm,
stand back, and I just felt like the people walking around,
mm,
they're all looking for something, and
yeah.
they want the quick fix, and they don't
Mm,
want to really delve in deep.
yeah.
And you can't. There's no quick fix. We're complex, and
Yeah.
you can try and simplify it. You can simplify it when you understand the complexity. If you don't
Mm,
understand this complexity, you can't simplify it.
yeah.
So you can explain it in a simplistic way, but for someone to actually really integrate that and live it, they have to actually understand
Mm,
themselves and their reactions to it.
yeah.
So, I'm watching at the moment. I'm sort of looking at one of the things I did write in the other book is, when did truth become the enemy?
Mm,
And why have we not embraced, the truth
yeah.
without having it filtered through some story that suits our ego.
Well,
Just look the truth.
if you want it embraced, it's all about keywords. So you got to get a YouTube channel, and you got to have the right keywords there. So suicide, depression, child abuse, spiritual healing, like a few of those horrendous keywords there. Think about how damaged and how vulnerable a person is, and what kind of keywords they're going to be typing in. And put those ones down as your keywords for that YouTube channel, and bada bing, bada boom, the algorithm will send you a whole heap of very vulnerable, very damaged people, and you can manipulate them any way you like, sis.
Oh God,
That's the idea.
no. Well, yeah. Well, I'm on YouTube, but you know
But
what?
you can't do that. You can't do that as a truth speaker. So you're not going to have a voice in this world, because they don't have psychic fairs anymore, and if they do, hardly anybody goes to them. Because you do better online.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
What you going to
Yeah.
do?
Well, see, and for me, I'm not a psychic, but I can read soul energy. I can read emotional energy, which everybody does. I just do it a little bit on
Yeah.
steroids. You know what I mean? I just sort of, but
It's
everybody
called
does
nonverbal
read.
communication and shared
Exactly.
context.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. But sometimes I hear.
there are occluded informatics that are quite biological and quite explainable, that we often have metaphors that are spiritual to explain. But they're pretty much there and measurable. If you're they're getting better at measuring these things. They keep discovering the things that carry these signals, like mycelium and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
So
So very cool.
what are your parting words, Tyson? What do you want people to know?
There are capital G gurus, but they're in India, and they just have local followings there. Everyone else is a small G guru. Stay the hell away from them. Be careful. Don't get ripped off. Strengthen your relationships. If you want to heal yourself, heal your relationships.
Yeah.
If you don't have any relationships, you are going to die really soon. So get some relationships and make them healthy, good ones. And they don't have to all be human beings either, or pets that you've trapped in your house. Make some non-human relations that are independent of you out in the world. Yeah. I'm not expanding the relational web that way. That's how you heal.
I enjoyed the conversation.
But caveat at the end, says the sick dude.
Righto.
Yeah. Don't listen to me. I got no advice for you. If I had good advice, I'd be following it and I'd have my shit together. I don't.
That's called being human. That's called being human.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. It's
Thank
really
you,
good to
Tyson.
yarn with you, Lorraine.